This morning, I would like to share with you a sermon delivered by the Reverend Theresa Soto, who I understand now is in Oakland. But when she wrote this way back in 2015, she was the minister at the UU Church in Salem, Oregon. I hesitated in selecting this sermon because of it being written 5 years ago and was afraid that it would not be relevant. But as I read the text, I realized most, if not all of this is relevant even today. What we are lacking these days, it seems, is the integrity, especially with the powerful. This essay examines the role of integrity in becoming and realizing our whole selves. So now in Reverend Soto's words. Comic books teach us the importance of a secret identity. When Clark Kent puts on a simple pair of smart person glasses, that's it. No one can even recognize him as Superman. Barry Allen is a forensic scientist who's famous at work for always being late. But when he wears a stretchy red suit and a mask that covers his eyes, he becomes the Flash. Other superheroes have only one identity. Connor Hawke, the second Green Arrow, used to introduce himself to people by his name as he rescued them, but they never really remembered it. Wally West was the third Flash, and he never hid his identity either. In fact, the whole town came to his wedding when he married a police officer from outer space. What do these two types of heroes teach us? The most important building block of your superhero identity is your very self. Masks are optional. Ralph Waldo Emerson, you remember him, put it this way: to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you be something else is the greatest accomplishment. And there are lots of other things that tug at you constantly to act in ways other than your most important priorities and the things that would enliven you. See if some of these demands sound familiar. Things you should do, things that no one else is doing, things that someone needs help with. All of these may be good things, but if they distract you from being your best self, they may be taking away from your ability. And it's for this reason that Warren Buffett, who some people describe as the most successful investor of the 20th century, defines integrity very simply as the ability to say no. I am an intern at the Portland VA, and once a week I spend the night at the hospital and visit the veterans in intensive care and anyone else that calls for a chaplain. I learned a very useful thing from my supervisor, Chaplain Phillips, and he put it this way: Teresa, you have an unlimited supply of no's. As you accustomize yourself to saying no to the good things so you can say yes to the best things, you may have to say no a lot. And this is quite all right. Excuse me. Yes, we have an unlimited supply of no's. You can use them in service of living your best life. In part, this speaks to guilt. As long as we can remember, some of us have been convinced that we should always say yes. No isn't allowed to become a joyful expression of our clarity about ourselves. And are you ready for a pro tip? It is really very super likely that work-life balance is a myth. It might be that the closest we can shoot for is to live in accordance with our priorities. We say yes to the important and we nurture it. And we say a polite, sweet no to the rest. Let's spend a little time talking about where our superpower comes from as superheroes. Your power lies with transparency. When you are transparent, you will be able to rely on your own honest speech. You will be able to say what you mean. And some people may worry about that. They worry that if they always tell the truth, they will not be nice enough. Let's make some distinctions about that. First, there is always a difference between cruel words and true words. One of the Proverbs of King Solomon from the Hebrew Bible puts it this way: The right word at the right time is like a custom-made piece of jewelry. And a wise friend's timely reprimand is like a gold ring slipped on your finger. Are you in the habit of using I statements? I statements address conflicts or issues by making a direct appeal to another person for their collaboration in a situation. So the thing about using something like an I statement is that it occurs to me that it's pretty easy for a minister or a speaker like this, like myself this morning, or a person talking about something to tell you, hey, it's really important for you to tell the truth and be yourself, and then not tell you how to do that exactly. Neil Gaiman is a contemporary novelist, and he addressed that problem this way. He says, I've been making a whole list of the things that they don't teach you at school. They don't teach you how to love somebody. They don't teach you how to be famous. They don't teach you how to be rich or how to be poor. They don't teach you how to know what's going on in someone else's mind. They don't teach you what to say to someone who's dying. They really don't teach you anything worth knowing. I would gently disagree. I probably, despite my best efforts, learned a few things worth knowing at school. This point. So today I want to talk more specifically about those I statements as we consider how they're part of integrity. Well, the first thing they rely on is sharing personal feelings. They focus on facts, and they stay away from cruel language, blaming or shaming. To construct an I statement, I have to think about how I feel. Now, I'm not going to use a specific situation. I'm sure you can think of a few specific situations of your own. So maybe just call one up to mind that's a conflict or an annoyance and test this method on it. First, identify the feeling. In the moment, I felt angry. I have to think about the action that's the focus of my statement. I felt angry when you, and then I have to say why or how it affects me. I felt angry when you XYZ because a lot of times it's going to bring up an overall reaction. For example, I felt angry when you XYZ because I felt disrespected, because I felt my wishes were being ignored, because I felt you weren't listening. So the idea is to focus on the feeling, the action, and the result, to be able to communicate your truth. Consistently practicing I statements is one way to bring transparency to the way that we talk to each other. A practice supportive of our integrity as people, and then supportive of our integrity within the community. Another important distinction in speaking with integrity is that not telling someone the thing they need to hear doesn't actually spare them. It isn't a nice act. Have you had your teeth cleaned by the dentist lately? There may have been some scraping, some scrubbing, and finally some rinsing. It might have been sore, but generally we call dentists hopeful and not mean. Their work has a curative effect, and your words can have the same curative cleansing effect if you let them. If you speak with kindness, allowing the truth of your words to be the power behind them. Let's talk about some tough truths that are kinder spoken than hidden or ignored. On a global level, climate change is affecting everyone on the planet and causing destruction of homes, of animals, and people in all corners of the planet. What is happening, how to change it, is a kind truth. To emphasize that time is running out, to grapple with climate change is kinder still. How can I justify not mentioning the urgency of the situation? On a national level, white supremacy is bumping up against the decisions of thousands of Black people and their allies to assert that Black lives matter. Checking in with myself and others about the white privilege we have and how to fight anti-Black racism in our communities is essential to healing the wounds of racism. In the states of Oregon and Washington, nearly 36,000 miles of rivers and streams associated with agriculture remain polluted in the Northwest, to the point that they don't meet the standards of the Clean Water Act, according to the EPA report records. And more specifically, It's important for us to notice that under the banner of climate change, we've become less attentive to fighting pollution levels. But actually each one of those levels that we can change or strengthen the cleanliness on a local level, it's a driver for climate change on a global level. So it matters what we do. We can have a multiplier effect, acting locally, impacting globally. But this kind of acting or ignoring the problem out of a generalized anxiety because climate change is too large of an issue, it keeps us from tackling what we can do. But we can focus our attention on things like local pollution. And as we do this, we will be taking steps to improve the overall climate situation. On an individual level, please tell me if I have spinach in my teeth, please. Please hold each other accountable for the way that you share space and time in classes and meetings. And yet, this consideration of what it means to hold truths that are kinder spoken than silenced would be lopsided without consideration of how practicing speaking truth affects you as a spiritual community. One of the most remarkable, elastic, transformational things about Unitarian Universalism is that the practice and power of our faith and ethics arises in covenant. Does that sound familiar? Theologian Rebecca Parker describes those covenantal relationships as freely chosen and life-sustaining, and she calls them interdependence. Interdependence is about mutuality and about depending on one another. The way you are in relationships with members of this spiritual community speaks to us directly of the spiritual values that we hold in common and we hold important. What is at stake is the ability to be yourself, the ability to shape your priorities by being able to say no, or your ability to simply and clearly tell your truth. What's at stake here? This is more than a question of your personal empowerment or self-improvement, though I am 110% in favor of those things. We must, at the same time, expand our own vision. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. put it this way: the end is reconciliation, the end is redemption, and the end is creation of the beloved community. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opponents into friends. It is this type of understanding and goodwill that will transform the deep gloom of the old age into exuberant gladness of the new age. It is this love which will bring about miracles in the hearts of people. Can you imagine how we would shortchange this vision of a beloved community if we came to it with only the palatable or nice parts of our truth? It is almost as though, separated from the entirety of the story, these truths become weak and unusable. And then you must choose. One tricky thing about integrity is that talking about it doesn't help much. Not even thinking about integrity will change much in the world at all. At some point, every hero takes steps to do what they commit to. Superman rescues Lois Lane and others. Batman answers the bat phone. And you and us, we can step into the fullness of being ourselves, making the choices that ask us for a yes. Practicing speaking our truths, even when we are angry and full of feeling, even when we are afraid and worried that no one will like what we have to say, even when we are not precisely sure whether we can make a difference. The thing about our human experience is that it seems linear to us. One thing happens and then the next thing happens. But we are always in the same way, moments away from results that could not have even been imagined. We can bring more love to any moment. We can bring more truth. We can bring more courage. How does it change the choices before us if we refuse to encounter them with a business as usual attitude? What is possible if we remain curious, if we bring our own might, if we embrace practicing integrity, choosing to embrace it with our whole hearts? I offer you things that we could not have even imagined to change our world as we know it. I know before we have talked about invitation, and it has been a while, so I'm going to review and refresh. A real invitation is one in which both yes and no are acceptable answers. So if I invite you to my house for dinner, you can say yes or you can say no. If yes is the only correct answer, then it's probably something like a coercion or a manipulation and not a real invitation. Michelangelo, I'm going to tell you something about him that is going to invite you to wonder what would happen. What would happen? What would be possible if integrity was one of my always operating principles, always being myself, always telling the truth? Michelangelo was a superhero of a kind, an artist across disciplines, painting, architecture, poetry, sculpture, and even engineering. He sculpted two of his most famous works, La Pieta, a sculpture of Jesus and Mary, and David, a depiction of the biblical king, before he turned 30. About sculpting, he had this to say: "In every block of marble, I see a statue as plain as though it stood before me, shaped and perfect in attitude and action. I have only to heal away the rough walls that imprison the lovely apparition, to reveal it to the other eyes as mine see it." What is it that you will have to chip away from your life in order to view your masterpiece? What will you have to support to shape the beauty that is both your destiny and your birthright? One more invitation. Are you ready? As you consider what process your artistic effort will take, resist the temptation to think of yourself as going to the work alone. You are here in community because we are more together than we are apart. Your best life is not something that you can shape alone in your private thoughts. Rather, as we come together to learn, to work, to grow, we are more able to see both ourselves and each other. Come to spiritual community. The superpower of integrity and your unique and particular self are what we need for this mission. We can do this together. Amen, and blessed be.